Hello, guys. Welcome to another exciting episode on the show. Control or Be Controlled podcast designed to help you start thinking differently and take control of your life. And I remain your host, Darlington. Today's guest is Caroline Hood, a certified sex therapist, licensed clinical social worker, executive leader, writer, and author of the forthcoming book, Sex Begets Sex, Reclaiming Desire as an Act of Female Empowerment. Caroline, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Darlington. It's so nice to be here.
All right, so Caroline, I would also like you to introduce yourself to my audience.
Sure. Yeah, you gave a little snippet. I'm like I said, I'm happy to be here. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a sex therapist, a mother of three, and a person that's just really, really fascinated by human behavior. And I have spent a lot of time in education really circling in on why we behave the way we do and really trying to understand that from this place of how our intimate lives happen and how our sex lives happen or don't happen and why we do what we do, because sex and intimacy and love and relationships is such a universal behavior. Yet many times these conversations and these topics are not spoken about, and they're very private and very individual. And so I'm a person who just really loves being in connection and community about these conversations and wants to bring to light what I think a lot of people would love to speak more openly about, but find that it's scary or a little shameful. So that's who I am, and I'm excited to chat today.
All right, thank you so much. This particular topic is such a sensitive topic that even among couples, they find it difficult to discuss. So I have some questions there for you, Caroline.
Yeah.
You have spent more than 25 years working with relationships, trauma, and mental health. What drew you to focus specifically on desire and intimacy?
As I said, I think I am somebody who's fascinated about why we do what we do. I think human behavior is fascinating. And I've particularly been drawn to this realm of intimacy and sex because of this tension we see, or this juxtaposition of sex and intimacy being so universal and so human and so normal, and yet also something that in many cultures and for many of us is so shame ridden and so private. And so that tension between being so normal and yet not is something that's fascinated me. And I see in how we behave as human beings, there's just such a drive for connection and love and desire and sex. And yet it's something that we continue to not speak about openly and share and support people in learning and understanding. And so that's really been just a huge drive for me to try to understand, and then again to be in community and connection with others around these topics.
All right, thank you so much, Caroline. So my next question for you is this. The upcoming book is called Sex Begets Sex. What does that title mean, and what inspired you to write it?
Sure. So I think Sex Begets Sex really speaks to a feedback loop. And so I'll describe that a little bit. This feedback loop is really what we want to see in healthy, intimate relationships, which is a positive feedback loop where you'll have sex. It's pleasurable sex. It's enjoyable. It's fun. And so therefore you want to have more because you enjoy it. And you want to have more, so you end up having more. So you do have more. So there's this feedback loop of you have sex, you enjoy it, it's fun, And so you have more of it. And so you enjoy it, and so on and so forth. And this really positive, virtuous feedback loop. And you can envision it the opposite way as well, right? Which is to say, you don't have much sex, and therefore you're not deriving much pleasure because there's an absence of sex. And so therefore you end up having less and less sex because there is no pleasure that's reinforcing that behavior, saying, oh yeah, this thing was fun, I want to do it again. And so we don't want to create that negative feedback loop. We want to really support that positive feedback loop of frequency and pleasure sort of deriving and fulfilling a relationship. And so that's the crux of Sex Begets Sex. And one of the many reasons that I wrote this book was really to speak to couples who are in long-term relationships where there is love. There may be children, there may be decades of lives built together and memories and joy. But somewhere along the way, those couples became only companions or only parents or only coworkers. And I want to remind couples, and particularly women, that we have an inherent right to our pleasure, and we have an inherent right to sexual intimacy, and that desire doesn't have to fade. The norms might tell us that desire fades in long-term relationships, but what I want to show people is that that's not inevitable. And we certainly can maintain it in long-term relationships with intention.
All right. Thank you so much, Caroline.
Sure.
So many people assume that losing desire in a long-term relationship is inevitable. I personally agree with that. Do you agree with that, or is something else happening?
The loss of desire, rather, is certainly not inevitable. We're sort of fed that stereotype from movies and media and books, and really everywhere we see it is just that goes away as you age, or the longer a relationship goes. It's certainly not inevitable. I think the biggest thing that happens with desire is it gets pushed to the side or it gets buried. Desire needs to be nurtured and cultivated, just like anything else, just like a healthy eating routine, right? Or a healthy physical activity routine. You need to buy healthy groceries. You need to maybe go to the gym or go for a walk and make time for those things. You also need to make time and attend to your sexual partnership, and your sexual intimacy with your partner. And so it's important that we remember and maintain that connection with our partner, with attention, with nurturing, with time, and not assume that it will just happen around the margins or be the result of a very organized life. It needs to be something that's embedded in your life despite potential stress and chaos and child rearing and all of the things that make life very busy and very full.
Okay, so but I still believe that even after all these things, there's still going to be some lack of desire in the long term. I don't know.
Sorry, can you say that again?
So I said I still believe even after all these things you have mentioned, there's still going to be like a lack of desire between couples in the long term.
Yeah, you still think so, even though you think it's just inevitable?
Yeah, I think it's just inevitable.
So I think potentially this is a piece of where people think that you need to have novelty in a long-term relationship to keep that desire, to keep that, quote, spark. And most people equate novelty with a new partner. And that's the kind of only way we think about novelty, right? Like we need to meet a new person or have sex with a new person. And so if you're in a long-term relationship, right, and not having an intimate connection with somebody new, then you don't have that novelty. And so that's where I think actually some of the science comes into play when we think about novelty. One thing, novelty doesn't exist just with a new partner. You can create novelty within a relationship and a partner you've known for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. That, again, takes intention. The other piece around novelty that I think a lot of people confuse for excitement or chemistry or these other really positive things, novelty can also be anxiety. Anxiety and excitement trigger the same parts of our brain. And we as humans can misunderstand which one we're experiencing. So we feel anxiety as excitement, or we feel anxiety as a positive thing, and we attribute that to novelty. And so I think we're often conflating all of those things together when really we want to tease it apart and recognize that novelty is often anxiety. And so how do we keep the safety and security of knowing a partner really well and feeling very connected with them, but also keep enough excitement within that? And that's a balance, right? There's the balance of having the safety of a long-term relationship with the balance of also having this freedom and excitement and continuing to treat your partner like a lover and not just a friend, and make sure you treat yourself like a person who deserves pleasure and not just a person whose pleasure, who that part of their life has failed.
Right, Caroline, thank you so much. So, moving on, what are women privately thinking or feeling about sex that they often don't feel safe discussing openly?
I think there's a lot of things that women don't feel safe discussing openly, and I think it's interesting because, and this holds true for men too, but it's often our partners that we are most afraid to share our sexual desires and fantasies with. And some people might think about that and go, well, that's weird. That's your partner. That's the person you're supposed to love and trust and connect with. But I think it's pretty understandable when we understand that your partner, that's where the stakes are highest. That's where their response and their reaction means the most. So you can talk about your fantasies and desires to a friend or a therapist or maybe somebody you don't know very well, because they might look at you and react poorly, perhaps, to your fantasies or desires. But that relationship is low stakes. It doesn't mean anything necessarily. And so if you stop seeing that therapist, for instance, it's okay. It's not going to be disruptive to your life. But if you share a deep fantasy with a partner and they respond poorly, then that's really meaningful and really detrimental to your ego, to your confidence, and to the stability of your relationship. So I think it's very normal to feel scared to be open about these things because the stakes are so high. The other thing I think is important to understand about this kind of lack of sharing what people want is that oftentimes people don't even know. And I think that holds true very much for women who have never been given societal permission, nor have they given themselves permission to validate their own desires and validate their own pleasures. And so they don't really even know what it is that they're interested in or not interested in because they haven't felt permission to explore that. So there's a lot of things that are going on when it comes to kind of that lack of communication about sex and intimacy. And some of it's coming from our own internal behavior, our own fear. Some of it's coming from cultural messaging. And that's where we want to really kind of try to break that down and unpack that and try to understand where it's all coming from so that we can just begin tiptoeing into those conversations.
Okay, thank you so much. I actually believe that is why I feel like is people always go outside there to explore their sexual fantasy with people who are not their partner because then they feel safe. This person will not judge them. So how do you think what is the best way to bridge that? How can I open up to my partner about the things I like, knowing fully well that she might not be, she might start to see me differently and start to have like
Mhm.
a different thought of me.
Sure. Yeah, I think you're right. It can be scary. So I really want to normalize that and that is a potentially scary conversation to enter into. And so I encourage people to do a couple things. Don't bring up these desires and these fantasies right before sex or in the bedroom or right after sex. Have these conversations in an environment that's separate, over coffee, on a walk, in the middle of the afternoon, at some point where it's not tied to that exact sexual encounter. I think that's the first thing. The second thing that I really encourage couples to do is to enter into this conversation from a place of compassion and vulnerability and curiosity. And that can look a number of different ways, but one way to think about it is to go to your partner and say, I love you so much. We've built this beautiful life together. We have these amazing children, or whatever the structures of your relationship are. And say, and I love our intimate partnership. I find you to be incredibly sexy. I love our sex life. I love being a sexual being. And I think there's ways where it can be even better. And I've had some thoughts about some things that might interest me. And I want to share them with you because you're the person I love most in this world. And you're the person I want to be most vulnerable with. And you're the person I want to be most intimate with. And so I want to share these things with you. And I'm a little scared and I'm a little nervous and that feels a little awkward. But I want you to know that this is an invitation into seeing a deeper side of me. And I want nothing more than to be more deeply connected with you. So I think if you can broach a conversation with some sort of that tone, it becomes much more connective as opposed to a conversation that might have a reaction from your partner of like, oh, okay, hey, I'm into this, I want to do this. And then there's not necessarily that openness to really hearing and seeing your partner.
All right, thank you so much. So, for couples who have grown emotionally distant or sexually disconnected, what's the first conversation they should be having?
Yeah, this is really common. And I think it's a little bit like what we just discussed in this last question, which is that the couples need to come together in conversation outside of the bedroom and come from a place of longing. I always think that there's such couples who have been together a while, they never stood up on their wedding day and said, oh gosh, 10 years from now, I hope we're not having any more sex. I hope that we feel like roommates instead of lovers. So go back to those intentions you set early on and go back and look at your partner and say, I love you. You mean everything to me. We have this beautiful life together. And we've kind of lost our way a little bit when it comes to our physical intimacy. And I want you to know that that piece of our partnership is important to me. And that piece of my identity as a sexual being is important to me. And that physical intimacy that you and I have together is so valuable, and I want to bring it back. And I don't know exactly where to start, and I'm not entirely sure, but I want to start, and I want you to come on this journey with me. And will you be with me to bring this piece of our relationship back? So that conversation right there, that starts from a place of want and desire and longing. It doesn't start from a place of accusation and resentment, because that conversation is not going to go anywhere good. But a conversation about longing and want is a really beautiful entry point into that discussion.
Okay, thank you so much. So here is my final question for you. If you could leave our listeners one message from your work, what would you hope it would be?
I think I want listeners to know that desire doesn't inevitably fade over the lifespan or over the course of a long-term relationship, and that it is valid and important to pursue that's one of our rights as human beings, as animals, as adults, to have a pleasurable, active, intimate life. And it's important to maintain that, and you're allowed to want to maintain that. And that it absolutely can stay. It just needs a little intention. It just needs a little nurturing. That's all.
Okay, thank you so much. This has been a very, very exciting episode. Thank you for such an honest and thoughtful conversation. Your work reminds us that intimacy isn't simply about sex. It's about identity, communication, play, emotional connection, and giving ourselves permission to remain fully human throughout every stage of life. So for those that would like to learn more about your work and your upcoming book, Sex Begets Sex, Reclaiming Desire as an act of female empowerment, how can they do that?
Sure. I'd love for listeners to come over to my website or my Instagram or my Substack. All of them are under the same handle of Desire in Real Life. So it's desireinreallife.com, on Instagram at Desire in Real Life, and again on Substack at Desire in Real Life. And all of those places you'll find my writing, you'll find my updates, you'll find tips and ways to connect with me if you are interested in resources or having a longer conversation.
Okay, thank you so much. And thanks to all my audience as well. You guys are the reason why we are always doing this, why we are here. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you for joining us today, as always. So make sure to check out Caroline's work. Caroline, thank you for coming to my show.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here. I appreciate it.
All right, and do have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you. You too.
All right, bye.